So, if you haven't been paying attention to the news, you may not have seen the absolute insanity that's been happening in America this week, in the American economy. So, we're going to talk about it for a little bit. Hey, Paul! Gotcha with the notification, I guess. How goes it, buddy? The tariffs are insane. And my dad literally was going to my sister being like, the clickbait worked yet. My dad was literally going to my sister being like, look, you don't understand. There's gonna be benefits down the road. It's gonna bring good stuff to us. We just gotta suffer through, maybe some not so great things, but then we're gonna reap the benefits later down the road. And that was enraging. It's all part of his plan. That was enraging because there are not... It would be one thing. What's so very frustrating about Trump's tariffs is that tariffs are not inherently a bad thing. And tariffs are actually kind of a really important tool for working to protect important industries for the working class population of a country. 40 years of neoliberalism have made it to where, all of the manufacturing jobs in America have left and are now overseas. And so in order to bring those manufacturing jobs back, tariffs are a really important way to make that happen, to help that happen. Because a tariff is a tax. I've been going through 19th century history, and Trump loves to talk about McKinley and his tariffs and blah 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 blah. How great tariffs were, and it's funny because Grover Cleveland was the first Democratic president after the Civil War in the so his second term is in the 1890s. I can't remember. I think his first term is in the late 1880s. Because I think he was the first president to, like Trump did, do a term and then have another president be president and then do another term. And Grover Cleveland, one of his big things was he was the first Democratic president to be elected after the Civil War, because there has been, broadly, it's more nuanced than this, but there's broadly been a ideology switch between the parties, where the Democratic Party back in the days of the Civil War in the 19th century was the more conservative party, and the Republican Party was the more liberal party. Like Abraham Lincoln, who was working to emancipate black people from slavery, was a Republican, and the phrase radical Republican got thrown around at people who were actively trying to win the vote for women and increase equal standing between the races and fight for reparations for Native American people, fight for the abolition of conditional divorce, and fight for the establishment of policies like no-fault divorce. Those were the radical Republicans. They were the AOCs and Ilhan Omar's and Bernie Sanders of their day. But Grover Cleveland, Republicans had been in charge because Democrats were widely seen as the party of traitors, because they were the ones who basically started the Civil War. And so Republicans were in power from the 50s and 60s all the way until the 1880s for 40 years almost. This is a huge tangent, but I bring it up because it's funny to think the conservative party back in the day was the Democrats and was Grover Cleveland's party, and Grover Cleveland was actively working to lower tariffs because tariffs were the primary tool for bringing in government revenue. And Grover Cleveland was like one of his flagship policies was trying to lower tariffs because conservative people don't like taxes, and the Republicans were the ones working to raise tariffs, and the economy was in such disarray, especially for working class people in the 80s and in the 1880s and 1890s. That's how Republicans lost, was that they kept on increasing tariffs, and people were broadly really frustrated by that, and so they voted for Grover Cleveland, because Grover Cleveland was like, I'm going to lower tariffs, and now like the conservative one is the one who's like, tariffs are beautiful, tariff, the most beautiful word. So it's just ironic that now Donald Trump is the one who wants to get rid of the tariff, who wants to bring back tariffs and make them like broadly a tool used for bringing in government revenue. That's going to be important here in just a second. If you both heavily tariff each other, does it essentially cancel out, or does it depend on which country has more of a command economy? Because then we'd still currently be at the whim of Vietnam and China for most of our exports. We don't send them much. That's true. We don't send them much because America doesn't manufacture anything. That's also part of the problem. So tariffs are not inherently a bad thing. It's very frustrating because Trump is like poisoning the idea of using tariffs to protect certain industries in America. Because I want to be able to work to protect industries in America. The problem is Trump is using them so broadly that the potential benefits of tariffs, like potentially bringing back manufacturing or increasing the quality of jobs, Trump is using them so broadly that the negative side of tariffs are canceling out any benefit that might happen. Not only that, Trump isn't using tariffs. That's what's so frustrating about it, is we get all of the negative aspects, all the deflationary aspects of tariffs, because Trump is like, I'm going to use tariffs. You're not going to believe how high the tariffs are going to be. And so the entire market is like, oh my God, we're going to lose so much money on imports. We got to sell. And so the economy collapses like it did after Liberation Day. And so not the economy necessarily, but the stock market collapses. So you get all those negative things, and then the second they went into effect, people weren't buying, federal bonds, and so he was like, "Oh, actually, we're taking the tariffs away." They were getting a little yippy, and so we didn't. Tariffs can be an important tool whenever you actually use them, but they are deflationary and they do cause, market instability. And they can be, not great for short-term profits. And so we don't get any of the positive things of tariffs because he takes them off immediately. And we get all the negative aspects of tariffs because he's threatening to use them all of the time. But tariffs are not inherently a bad thing. This is the way that tariffs work. We're like a hollow outsourced franchise, 100%. We don't manufacture anything in America anymore. And so nobody buys anything from us because we don't manufacture anything to be able to sell them. But that's okay because we own SWIFT, and the dollar is the global financial currency used for trade. So that's completely fine for us to have trade deficits with all of these countries that do actually do manufacturing. Trump just doesn't. I don't know. I don't even really think that the trade deficits are an issue that Trump is super concerned about. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The tariffs are, this is how tariffs work. So, let's say we want to increase automobile manufacturing in America. We want all of these car plants that shipped all their manufacturing factories overseas. We want them to invest in America and start building those factories here again so that we can employ American citizens. If you try to start tomorrow's stream like this, I will go home. This is important, Cameron. Also, everybody know that Cameron is going to be on the stream tomorrow. It's very exciting. Cameron is playing Split Fiction on the stream tomorrow. But this is the way the tariffs work. So we want to increase automotive manufacturing in America. So we put a tariff on foreign imports of automobiles. We put a tariff on people who sell cars in America. They will have to pay an additional tax on top of the cost of the vehicle that they import from another country, so that we make those cars artificially more expensive, so that for the consumer, they go onto the lot and they see, oh, this Ford, which Ford isn't even manufactured in America, but whatever, this Ford, which could potentially be manufactured in America, is $3,000 cheaper than a comparable truck like a Toyota, because Toyota comes from Japan, and the person who's selling those cars is having to pay the tariff. So we artificially increase the cost of foreign made goods in a certain industry, so that people will say, I want to buy this one that's cheaper now. I want to buy this Ford because it's manufactured in America, even though, like I said, Fords aren't even manufactured in America. Why isn't your dad here listening? Exactly, Dad. I want to buy this Ford because it's cheaper, and so therefore Ford, we reward that company for making manufacturing their cars in America a priority. And so other businesses are like, hey, I don't want to have to I don't want my customers to have to pay the tariff to import our cars, so we will build a factory. Toyota, instead of manufacturing their cars in Japan, and which I don't even think they manufacture those in Japan, but whatever, instead of manufacturing their cars in Japan, they will start to manufacture cars in America, so that they don't have to pay the tariff, so that they can be more competitive. And so therefore we work to increase not only domestic companies manufacturing in America of automobiles in this example, but we also work to bring in foreign investors to start investing in American manufacturing as well. This is exactly how China built their huge manufacturing base. And so that's the basic way of the way that you want to use a tariff. The problem with what Donald Trump is doing is that Donald Trump is placing a blanket tariff on everything, on all goods from everywhere. And so with this, we're going to stick with the automobile manufacturer example. If you are manufacturing your cars in America, but because we don't manufacture anything in America, we don't manufacture the steel that you use to make the car in America. We don't manufacture the tires that you put on the car in America. We don't manufacture the engine here in America, or the carburetor, or the spark plug, or the exhaust system, or the computer chips that you put in the dash and everything. We don't manufacture any of that stuff in America. If you put a blanket tariff on everything, then the people who actually do manufacture here in America are going to get hit by those tariffs, because they're going to have to pay tariffs on all these other goods that they have to import. We don't manufacture any of that stuff here. And there are certain things like tires are hard to manufacture here because we don't have rubber here. Like, we don't grow rubber trees here very effectively. We don't have the climate for that. And so that's really an industry that's better served. We are better served by being in a country that is more capable of growing rubber trees and producing rubber tires and then shipping those tires to us. But whenever you put blanket tariffs on everything, now, Ford in this example, which manufactures their cars in America, even though they don't, in this example, they manufacture their cars in America. Ford has to pay the tariff on steel and the tires and the chips and the carburetors and the everything else. But Japan, who makes Toyotas, they're not paying any of those tariffs on any of that stuff. And so even though whenever the lot is selling a Toyota and a Ford next to each other, even though the lot is having to pay for the tariff for the Toyota, and that makes the price artificially go up, because we have tariffs on everything that's coming into America, the cost has gone up like even higher on the Ford, because they're having to pay the 10 to 20 to 145% tariff on the tires and the steel and the blah blah blah, whatever the heck. Steel is a good example of like steel is something that we don't make in America. The primary manufacturer of steel in the world is China. And so if we want to manufacture cars in America, car manufacturers in America will have to buy their steel from China, which now has a 145% tariff on it. So they'll have to pay an increased cost for their steel of at least 145%. And so everything is going to get dramatically more expensive, and we're not going to actually incentivize just plastic cars for sure. We're not going to actually incentivize manufacturing in America. Car parts are made elsewhere, like China. Final assembly can and does happen in the U.S., but if you tariff by individual components, the final price is way more expensive. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Whenever you put, hey guys, fill me in, you might have to rewind on the VOD because we're getting at least halfway through it. Probably more towards the tail end. But if you tariff everything in the economy, then even local manufacturers like Ford is building their cars in America now, and they have to pay the tariff on the steel and the rubber and the chips and the carburetors. They have to pay the extra tariffs on all of that stuff. And so they don't actually... domestic goods are sometimes now, probably most of the time, even more expensive than foreign goods, even though the foreign goods have a tariff on them. And so you don't incentivize people in America to buy domestic products. You don't incentivize investors to manufacture here in America. And all you do is you make everything way more expensive because we don't have any manufacturing here. We import everything, and now we're having to pay all these tariffs on it. And so, and that would be, the way that you use tariffs is strategically. And as much as I dislike Joe Biden and can criticize Joe Biden all day, one of the good things that he did was incentivize manufacturing in America by strategically tariffing certain industries. The CHIPS Act is a good example of this, where Joe Biden put tariffs on Taiwanese-made computer chips and started a program to give subsidies to chip manufacturers who built manufacturing plants in America. But you don't get the subsidy to make your manufacturing plant here in America unless you agree to pay your workers a good wage. And one of the stipulations specifically in the CHIPS Act was provide childcare for your workers. And people who try to be like, oh, laissez-faire, that's not, free markets or whatever. No business is gonna take on that added expense. Tons of businesses took on that added expense in order to get millions of dollars in subsidies to start manufacturing here in America. And now there are chip manufacturing jobs in America. Not a lot, because that program was only happening for, 2 or 3 years. But if you continue doing that for strategic, sectors, then you start building manufacturing up everywhere, and you start increasing the amount of total manufacturing happening in America. Whenever you put the blanket tariff on everything, you just negate the effect. It doesn't actually give us any positive benefits. And so my dad, who was like, oh, we just got to deal with the pain for a little bit because we're going to get benefits further down the road, doesn't understand that the blanket tariff means that everything is going to be way more expensive immediately. You're going to start seeing increased prices on stuff pretty quickly here, I would think. Even with, we still have a 10% tariff on everyone, at least for 90 days, supposedly. And you have a 145% tariff on China. That means that you're paying more than double for everything that's made in China, which is everything. What isn't made in China? And so I can't imagine that you're not going to see significant increases in prices over the next few months, because as a direct result of these tariffs that are not actually doing anything to increase local manufacturing, domestic manufacturing. What's even more confusing, there's a Toyota assembly plant in San Antonio and GM plants in Mexico that import to the US, and it's not as easy to tell by name brand alone. Absolutely. Coffee will be slightly more expensive now that there's only a 10% tariff on places like Guatemala and Colombia. Coffee is one of the things that we don't make here. And we import the vast majority of our coffee. And so coffee will be more expensive. It won't be nearly as expensive as it could have been if he stuck to the Liberation Day prices, Liberation Day tariffs. but that'll probably be one of the things that is going to be more expensive for sure. What's so frustrating is our extreme austerity here in America has made us not an ideal location for companies to invest in manufacturing, because you have to pay a lot for American workers. Not because you have to pay American workers a lot, but like there are American companies. I'm pretty sure it's Ford is the one that manufactures the majority of their cars in Mexico and Canada. Mexico is a place where they will go and manufacture their vehicles because wages are so low in Mexico. But wages are not terribly low in Canada, and a ton of car manufacturers, a ton of just manufacturers in general manufacture their goods in Canada because the manufacturing costs are so much less, because Canada has universal health care. In America, these manufacturing jobs, which are generally pretty good jobs that are going to get health care, the business has to pay a lot of cost for covering the healthcare for their workers. In Canada, even though they pay Canadians a higher wage to manufacture the goods than they do Americans, it still costs them less because they don't have to cover any of their employees' healthcare, because Canada has universal healthcare. And so there are policies like that that will help to... It's frustrating that we could increase manufacturing in America if we wanted to, and tariffs are going to be a really important part of that, as well as a bunch of other stuff. There are other policies that you can use to increase manufacturing in America. This is not it. Instead, I don't entirely understand. There is a whole big complicated conversation that I'm not nearly smart enough for. So what would you say is the solution, or the correct way to get the result the president is claiming this will bring? That's what I'm saying is I think what Joe Biden did with the CHIPS Act is a very nice first step. But if you start getting aggressive with corporations, where you put tariffs on foreign-made goods, you do give subsidies for these corporations to make manufacturing here in America, but you stipulate that your workers have to be unionized, and you have to pay your workers, a high wage, and you have to provide your workers childcare, and you have to cover all of your workers' health care. If we make those stipulations and these companies start manufacturing here in America, and we have good quality jobs, because that's what's so frustrating about it. People are like, oh, manufacturing jobs, we want to bring those jobs back. I could care less if I am working behind the desk at the newspaper, making the newspaper on a computer, or am in a factory, like in a press, printing, the paper, or I'm in a factory assembling laptops or whatever. I could care less what I'm doing. I just want a high quality job that's going to pay me enough to be comfortable and to provide for me and my family. And in America, there is, the American myth that was established in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, is that manufacturing jobs were those high quality jobs. But if we bring manufacturing jobs back, and we're not stipulating that you have to make these jobs high quality jobs, then all we'll do is we'll do manufacturing here in America and still be miserable. So the way that you do it is exactly like Joe Biden did. He tariffed chips from Taiwan, so that American computer companies like Apple, make smartphones. Their chips are manufactured in Taiwan. You stop manufacturing your chips in Taiwan. We're going to make you pay an additional cost to manufacture your chips in Taiwan, or you can take this government subsidy, pay your workers adequately, and give them adequate benefits, and start manufacturing those chips here in America to get those jobs back here in America. And then, and even like give them subsidies for whatever the silicon that they have to use to manufacture the chip. You make sure that we're not tariffing those goods so that it's super easy to manufacture those. But let's say there's silicon mining that can happen here in America. Once we get the chip manufacturing jobs here, but everybody's importing the silicon to be able to make the chips here, then once we have those chip manufacturing jobs, Then we start tariffing silicon, and we say, no, you mine your silicon here in America. Look, in this, I don't know if we can even do that, but as an example, look, over here in this area, you can mine silicon. Y'all start silicon mines there, and then you can and get your silicon here from America. And so now you're building up not just the chip manufacturing industry in America, but you're building up the silicon mining industry in America. And then all the silicon mines are getting all their equipment from China. The tractors and stuff, they're all made in China and Vietnam. We say, no, you don't get your tractors anymore from China and Vietnam. We want these tractor companies to start manufacturing their tractors here in America. So we're going to tariff the tractors. Once you build up the industry, then you start tariffing the next thing. And you keep that up for a long time. But whenever you tariff everything at the same time in a blanket fashion, then you don't get any of those benefits. Now, the chip manufacturer here in America, like, I under Joe Biden's leadership invested in American manufacturing and built a plant where I can manufacture chips here in America. But now I'm hosed because all the silica that I use to manufacture those chips here in America, Donald Trump that all comes from China, and Donald Trump just put 145% tariff on China. And so even though I manufacture here in America, I can't do that anymore. I'm going to have to shut down my operation, and some other bigger company is going to come and buy up my company because I can't afford to operate anymore. And so the tariffs hurt business. Donald Trump keeps on talking about it like medicine, but whenever Tylenol can be really effective at alleviating a headache, but whenever you take a fistful of it, you're going to cause other problems. And that's definitely the kind of thing that Donald Trump is doing here. The conversation, the real conversation is, why is he doing it? And that's the one that I don't understand. I don't have a clear answer for that. There is a big conversation about certainly one of his main, I think just very personally, one of his main motivators is he loves all of these people coming and kissing his butt. Like he literally said at the Republican whatever gala, all these people, they're coming, they're kissing my ass, they're saying, please, we'll do anything, lower the tariffs. And I think that he loves that. I think that's his favorite thing in the entire world. So I think that's a big part of it. It also just makes it very easy to buy him off, to say, if you do this thing, if you give Jared, $2 billion Saudis, then we'll get rid of your tariff, so it makes him easier to buy off. But I also think that there are other people in his administration that are really looking for, the big problem is they are foreseeing on the far horizon a war with China. And if anything, they're actively working towards a war with China. That's kind of what they want behind the scenes, I think. And they know that because China is the manufacturing hub of the world, if we went to war with China, we literally the chips that we make, the missiles that we fire at kids in Yemen, are manufactured overseas. They're not even really manufactured here. A lot of American ammunition is manufactured here, but China is better at manufacturing ammunition like that. And a lot of the components that we use to manufacture ammunition and missiles and weaponry like that is from overseas. And so I think that they foresee the issue that if we ever got into a war with China, then we would be in big trouble because they are the manufacturing hub of the world. So we need to get those manufacturing jobs back here. And so they are endeavoring to do that. I just, in my opinion, if that's really what you were trying to do, if you were really worried that China's the manufacturing hub of the world, we need to get manufacturing back here in America, you would do it in such a way that actually got manufacturing back here to America. A big part of me is just, he's that shallow and cynical that all he wants is for all these world leaders to come and suck up to him. And he doesn't even get that. He doesn't even get what he wants. He said himself the reason why he put the tariffs on pause is because the markets were getting a little yippy. And people like what's his name? Treasury Secretary, not Besant. Lutnick, Howard Lutnick. People like Howard Lutnick are the ones who are out here like, oh yeah, 4D chess move. Now he's got all these people groveling. Now America's the one on top, and they're blah 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 blah. But he says himself the reason why he put the tariffs on pause was because people in the bond market were getting a little yippy. They weren't buying American bonds, and usually whenever the stock market starts collapsing like it was doing, those people go and they invest their money in American bonds because those are a much more sure asset to own. But with America being as unpredictable as it is, people didn't want to buy those bonds, and a lot of these foreign countries that Donald Trump put these tariffs on hold U.S. bonds, and we're selling off a lot of those U.S. bonds. And so usually when you see the stock market kind of cratering, you see the bond market kind of increase, but both of them were cratering at the same time, which is very, very bad. And so I think that scared him, and so he took them off. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what the end game is. I think maybe he's just that shallow and that petty, which is unfortunate. But I can't explain his motivation very well. But what I do understand is that the tariffs are not providing any benefit to people, working class people here in America. Unfortunately, I wish that they were. I wish that we were actually working to build up manufacturing here in America so that we could increase people's easy access to jobs, especially high quality jobs. But I mean, we're not doing that. So, anyways, I've talked about tariffs long enough. It's time to get started on Death Stranding.